I am curious, Pam, about sort of how this changes like an IT department, or how it changes the role of a CIO, which obviously the spectrum is pretty wide there. But I would assume, if you've deployed one or a dozen of these robotic process automation tools, that things are going to change, but I don't really know exactly how.
Yeah, from a CIO perspective, I think it enables the CIO to be much more proactive in terms of, helping the organization to understand, how they can get value, as Leslie's just said, from that implementation of that technology, to be able to address some of the business challenges that the business is facing, and not just being focused very much on the mundane, but actually, as you say, learning, taking the insight that's available, and then be able to talk to the business decision makers around, how that could be used to, as I say, address the challenges and the issues that businesses. So a much more proactive, I think, role that from an IT decision maker perspective. And the other thing as well, in terms of the application of some of these technologies, we're really seeing them focus on IT functions, right? There's so much of the IT process that can be automated. We talked earlier.
Is that the report side, or is that?
But even service management side, we've worked with clients who have applied robotic process automation linked with some of the sort of initial cognitive services to reduce incident response rates, right? So, issues coming into the service desk reduced by 50% or more. Right, through the use of automation. So, some very standard requests for service can be handled by the robots.
Like my printer's not working.
Like your printer, I need my password changed, those sorts of things.
Right, those things that can walk through, as opposed to, because it is IT is a limited resource,
that's
always.
Right.
And so, instead of having 2 or 3 IT people, you suddenly, Pat, you have like 25, 100, or an unlimited number because you're running and RPA.
Well, there's over 50,000 people now that have gone through our academy, partners and our customers, and I think that and virtually all of them are in the business function. I think this is really an interesting time. Is the forward-thinking CIOs are saying, how can I empower the business operations to self-serve?
Yeah.
For them to be able to build and architect and put together in all different orders, all of those building blocks of production. They've got to be enterprise strength, that's the other thing. We can't just put little bits of wire around and run things on desktops and go back to Excel spreadsheets. We've got to find a way to democratize enterprise quality automation and cognitive technology. And that's been our focus, is building a technical infrastructure which is democratized to the business operations.
I'm just curious, like how, especially on the IT side, because that handoff to humans, like in an IT situation, how quickly, like what percentage of time does it have to get a tech issue have to get handed off to a human? Like how smart are these things?
Well, what we found is that the people build a sort of Pareto rule. They do an 80-20 rule to start with. So one of the big banks in America, the one you were talking about, they wanted to automate the end-of-day trading settlement. And 99% of it was already done through a straight-through processing system. But it still left quite a few thousand unmatched trades. And they had a group of 400 people who would sit there trying to match these trades. And actually, it was very, very complicated. So they started, but actually they found that they could write 20% set of rules that would deal with 80% of the exceptions. And then what was left, they basically just, but over a period of time, they just took the exceptions and they spotted the patterns in the exceptions, and they used technology to help them to identify those. Then they created a set of rules to deal with that. So they built a supervised learning, if you like, very, very smart set of processes. They're traditional rules, but actually what it did was it ended up with the knowledge of the enterprise was executable in these rule sets. Right. And there wasn't a single technical person involved in that whole process. And after 2 or 3 months, they were getting 99.9% of the exceptions that were being automatically matched trades, and which is quite exceptional, really.
So, Leslie, when you're in a situation like that where they've automated a process or certainly made it a lot better, how does the communication work, or how should it work between CIOs and their IT crews, like to to help them understand, one, they're not being replaced, but two, how they can properly communicate what's happening to the sort of client on the client side.
Yeah. I used to set a slow management review paper called "The IT Department is Dying" as a discuss to my students at Oxford, an undergraduate degree there. And that was 1986, that paper was written. It will never die because our technology has become more and more complex and most of us don't understand it. It's not become that user-friendly, especially in corporates. And so the CIO, whatever you want to call him or her, and the name changes over the years, there will always have to be technological expertise in-house. And they're massively overburdened. So to some extent, the automation game, as you move it into the business side, is a correct move, and it alleviates the pressure upon the IT department trying to look after global enterprise systems and emerging technologies and managing suppliers and things like that. But the move that IT directors need to make is to become much more business focused, and that's been true for the last 25 years. As IT has come out of the IT department, out of the mainframe, the center or something like that, and it's become spread throughout the business, the IT people need to be much more empathetic about what the business wants and what their requirements are. Right. But the business at the same time needs to understand the technology a lot more than they do.
So, but don't you think that's happening?
It is happening, but it's very slow. I mean, I speak as 35 years working in technology. I expect it to, like the slow management review author, John Diebold, I expect it to happen within 10 years, by 1995, and then the e-business thing came along, and internet, and then another technology came along, and then the IT department got another lease of life.
Yeah. No, the reason I asked is because one of the things that we're seeing, one of the challenges that CIOs talk to us about is the fact that, the business is becoming almost like businesses are becoming technology businesses.
Yes.
Right. So, and also as the profile and the age profile of workforces change, people are becoming so much more comfortable with technology, and also the spend in terms of technology is often moving out and dispersing across the organization.
Right.
Right. And, going back to a point you made earlier, Lance, about, the fear in the IT organization. I think the fear, also is in operations. In the back office operations. We see that where, often employees are concerned about the impact of AI and automation technology. So it goes beyond the IT organization.
To go back to my Maslow's, analogy, it has to be built on a secure platform.
Yeah.
So it's great being able to say, we've got this team working on these really funky, new channels and iPhones and stuff. But actually, the point the transaction is executed and the data is stored, that has to be an iron vault. Right. That can't be messed around with by the business. Yeah. So I think what a smart CIO is building these little sort of padded rooms where the business can express themselves and knock themselves out, but they're not going to compromise the security of the data, or compromise the audit, or compromise, and all these things are very boring, but they're incredibly important to organizations.
That's what CIOs have to do.
That's what CIOs have to do, exactly. Yeah.